What's up, everybody? I'm Simon Taylor, and welcome to FinTech Insider On Air, episode 39. We're at Cybos, right near the Discovery Zone, so do come say hello if you're here. Today we're going to be talking about connecting to all things cloud, and how is cloud impacting financial services, which sounds like a weird sentence, so we'll have to dig into that. Some stats, though, before we get into it. Apparently the average financial services firm uses an impressive 1,000 different cloud services. Financial services firms are big, but that's more than I thought. By 2020, banks will use the cloud to support more than half of their transactional systems. Pretty interesting. And in 2019, hybrid multi-cloud adoption rose from 71% to 84% year-on-year growth. That's really quite impressive. But to talk through some of this stuff, you don't have to listen to me anymore. I've actually been joined by somebody who knows what they're talking about, Adrian Poole, who is Head of Financial Services at Google Cloud. How are you doing, Adrian?
I'm very good, thank you, Simon.
Thank you so much for joining us. So I always find the word cloud is one of these really esoteric things. So what is the Google Cloud offering, and why are you guys at Cybos this year?
Sure. So Google Cloud is the culmination of Google's innovation over 20 years being made available for fintechs and established players to provide financial services, build new banks, and provide better services for their clients.
So, and cloud obviously came about when large companies like Google had infrastructure that was running at scale, and then could potentially, everybody talked about the cost reduction benefits of cloud, but there's a lot more to it than that when you're thinking about it from a bank's perspective or from a fintech's perspective. Yes, it's potentially cheaper than running your own data center at first, but what does the business case look like? What does it give me that I didn't have before?
Yeah, so I mean, you're right. If we now have 9 services outside of Google Cloud with 1 billion monthly users, and to support that from a reliability and availability and a security perspective, we have some of the best technology on the planet. But actually what Google Cloud is interested in, particularly my team in financial services, is solving business problems and solving problems for our clients. And so that might be around how you accelerate onboarding, how you use APIs to build new business models, how you might solve financial crime, how you might work with the investment bank to actually accelerate your deployment of grids, solving risk and pricing issues.
Wow. Okay, so some very practical sounding things there that would resonate with somebody in a bank, but let's pick any one of those and just work through it a little bit more and contrast like where we were sort of historically before cloud came along, and how some of the examples you just gave, KYC, AML maybe, or some of the investment banking stuff. What does the cloud implementation look like, and where do I get from and to?
Okay, so let's take financial crime. This is the kind of elephant in the room where traditional systems are actually very poor at catching people who are committing financial crime. And so we often talk about transaction monitoring. And the traditional systems throw out thousands and thousands of alerts, and people have to go sort through these, work out whether this is a real transaction or whether it's something that shouldn't really be occurring. And actually, probably 99% of those alerts are false positives, meaning they're not anything that we should be concerned about. And actually catching the bad people is really quite tricky. We've now got partners, clients who are building financial crime, anti-financial crime systems using things like machine learning, being able to pull in vast quantities of data to analyze some of these alerts and actually look at the transactions and reduce the number of alerts that are being created, also lower the number of false positives and identify some of those bad actors.
And by identifying those bad actors, I guess in a cloud space, they're not starting at, okay, so how do I start putting the servers into my data center? They're starting at, how do I plug this into what I've already got? So what does that journey look like? Let's just take the example of the anti-money laundering and financial crime prevention. So I've got an existing set of systems, they're producing alerts. What happens next if I start a conversation?
Right. So at a technical level, what we're really talking about is how do you ingest those systems that are requesting to make that transaction? Put it into, normalize that data, put it into a system that can analyze petabytes of data in seconds and minutes, and create a data pipeline that starts analyzing that. And I think the challenge for many clients is everyone talks about going straight to AI and ML, but actually being able to pull those vast data sets together and analyze them at speed can give huge benefits to clients. You can then start building pipelines to start taking benefit of machine learning and AI. to start predicting and looking for patterns that aren't obviously there in the first place.
So it's almost getting the basics right, getting the data out of your system, getting it into a stream, and sort of actually getting some almost instantaneous benefit before you get to some of the more complex stuff.
That's right. Now, Google's been applying AI and ML throughout our various systems for over 10 years. And the biggest learning is actually, it's not about having a really fancy algorithm. It's actually about having good data and vast quantities of it, and then having the systems that can then actually create the models very quickly. And we've created some of our own technologies to do that and accelerate what might take a week to do in a traditional on-premise environment, and do that in an hour or so. So for a data scientist, it really accelerates their time to get value.
And so if somebody's struggling with getting the data out of their legacy systems, and there's a lot of the data quality issue is something that you potentially couldn't control. How do you help clients think about things like that, and sort of that connectivity between the new world of cloud and kind of the traditional systems?
Well, I think when you're talking about the origination of the data, we really need to work with our clients to think about where is that data being captured, what are those systems, and what can we do to improve that original data capture? And that really is something that they and their ISVs can work through.
Interesting stuff, and I guess there's not just the big incumbents out there. There are lots of challengers, and some of the challengers and the fintechs are now got millions of customers. They've got scale problems. Do you support them as well, and have any been born on your platform and that sort of thing?
Absolutely. There's many fintechs who are born on our platform, and also some of the challenger banks. I mean, just today, Atom Bank, which actually at the end of 2018 had the fastest growing mortgage book in the UK, was struggling. They had a traditional outsourcing arrangement, really needed to be more agile in terms of their development and their capacity, migrated to Google Cloud, and today have announced that publicly. But also other clients use us, so I think one of the largest clients would be Blockchain Inc., 40 million wallets globally, and actually they've grown with us over time, so that's been a great relationship we have with the blockchain team.
And so there's a real mix there of people coming from the banking space, but the really quite cutting edge fintech space. How do you see the difference in the challenges they present? What's a fintech that's growing their business thinking about versus what somebody who's migrating bits of their infrastructure thinking about? Maybe starting with the fintech side.
Well, I think fintechs are really interested in how do I scale, how do I get the right people on board, how do I get the right talent and attract the right talent and keep them there, because it's a really competitive marketplace. I think the scalability and the use of cloud, they're typically cloud native people, and so that's very natural. I think when we're dealing with larger, more traditional players, we spend more time working with compliance departments, educating people on how to make sure that they are compliant with regulation, and just getting through traditional ways of behaving.
Interesting. The compliance side is one that's often thrown up as reasons why we can't use cloud, or some of the challenges with that. And I think we have seen in the UK at least, and now in many parts of the world, organizations that are almost entirely in the cloud, but still there's a lot of resistance, and people throw the C word around, they throw compliance around. How much do you think that is, there are legitimate challenges with cloud and sort of data at rest, and some of the compliance stuff that comes around GDPR and privacy and personally identifiable information, and how much of that is more of a perception piece that we can manage if we sort of work through?
I think both fintechs and incumbents are absolutely right to be concerned about it, making sure that they are compliant with GDPR, whatever the rules are that the local regulator may have set. But actually, we've solved these problems. Many banks have worked through these problems and have been reviewed by the regulator, and got that kind of no more questions, you may proceed approach.
And having gotten there, hopefully that starts to build some confidence. But we do see the hybrid multi-cloud, which is often thrown around as a term. But that sound, again, it's quite buzzwordy. Deconstruct hybrid for me, because are you cloud or are you not? It's an interesting question, and I think this is an option that more and more are starting to elect for as they see those nuances.
Yes. I think this really applies probably for more traditional players who've got large on-premise estates, and some of these systems aren't going to move anytime soon, and so hybrid really is that combination of using a public cloud and their on-premise estate.
Right.
And you mentioned multi-cloud, and that's something that Google Cloud is very supportive of, because we recognize that large financial institutions need to demonstrate some of the requirements of the regulators, so portability is important. And being able to show that is something that we respect and are very supportive of. A lot of what Google has done over the years has been writing about our innovations. So we first wrote about our map reduce. Doug Cutting then took that and created the Hadoop ecosystem. And then more recently, as we've gone through Google Cloud, a lot of our products, we will talk about making some of those available as open source systems. So people have heard of TensorFlow.
Yes.
Came from Google. Kubernetes was one of Google's operating systems that we've open sourced and still contribute very heavily to. And then in talk of data pipelines, Dataflow is one of our services, but actually the Apache Foundation are the custodians for Apache Beam, which is what people use more locally. And so there's this constant theme we have, which is supporting open source.
Yeah.
And then more recently, we've announced something called Anthos, which is trying to take that to the next step, which is actually simplifying and making it easier to operate in a multi-cloud and hybrid environment. So this is like an operating system for cloud world. And so you start perhaps working on premise and actually at a security and a networking level, set policy, but actually use that same system to then move that workload to Google Cloud or to AWS and Azure in time, without having to redo all that work around the networking and the security.
Which is powerful, because as people look at cloud migration, often what I've observed is that people start to almost try and go one by one through each of the services within cloud and say, okay, we can only use cloud unless we've completely customized the account and the installations and everything to our model. But actually the various levels of being on-prem, hybrid, and sort of then in the cloud allow you to manage risk in a different way, and having that operating system across the two could be extremely helpful. But I'm curious though about that journey to get there, because people, I hear the term cloud migration almost constantly as I talk to bankers, and sort of, I'm sure you've seen good ones and bad ones. What lessons can we draw as people are looking at cloud migrations from legacy? What are the things that we need to be mindful of and looking out for?
Yes, I think the first point I'd make is, what we're focused on is actually what's the business problem we're trying to solve. Let's focus on that as the overall outcome. I think just a migration for its own sake, without a business case, is, we should question that kind of initiative. But actually, if there is something where somebody, needs to exit a data center, then we have a number of methodologies, and we also work with many systems integrators to work through that. And fundamentally, what you've got to do is start looking at how those applications, what state are they in? Are they legacy on a mainframe? That's going to be a different kind of problem to solving something that may already be containerized as the extreme. And then working out what are those cohorts of applications that could be grouped together and migrated.
Interesting, because if you have developed something more recently, it's easier, and it's almost looking for that not too hot, not too cold, Three Bears style sort of problem to solve with cloud migration, where I'm going to get material business benefit from it, but it's not going to break the bank, be the biggest migration in the world, and do all the things at once. So have you seen people start to phase these and look at the step-by-step and build confidence, or would you recommend that approach?
Well, I think that makes sense. The Treasury Select Committee is very focused on resiliency, as we all are. It's critically important that we provide services and they are highly available. And I think if you think from the way the world has moved from the waterfall model of development to more agile methodology, where you're releasing code multiple times a day, that's the way we should be thinking about some of these iterations and these migrations. So you're not going to do a big bang. You're going to do this over time.
It's interesting as well, what are the things you need to put in place in order to start that process and the tooling around it. So the talk of an operating system across that, I'm sure, is hugely confidence building for people. I'm curious though, what you've learned from working with some of the fintechs. The fintechs are constantly evolving, constantly changing, and I'm curious, sort of what you've learned from them and what excites you about that space.
Well, I think the exciting thing with fintechs is actually it's the pace, and it's the ambition and the talent that we see. And I think what's also exciting is that the products get released very quickly, because they may not be trying to boil the ocean. They'll have a very focused area they're driving, and then actually as somebody who's managing that area, we stay in touch with them, and I just love to hear. I was with Go Cardless yesterday, who are one of our longer, clients, and they've just launched in the USA, which of course is enabled by the cloud.
Yes.
So it's their 8th geographical region, and it's just great to see this progress that our clients are making.
And it doesn't mean, so they didn't have to find necessarily their own data center. They didn't have to scope that out. They didn't have to land infrastructure and own infrastructure and have that capex investment. But also a lot of the things that they've done in other countries, so much of that was transportable. Many of it not. There will be clearly nuances, but that transportable piece is really, really interesting. So as you look forward, where do you see Google Cloud in the fintech ecosystem? You already said you support multi-cloud by default. So where do you differentiate and see your strengths, and where do you guys think that there's opportunity for other partners?
Sure. So I guess what I generally do is listen to what clients are saying to me, because that's really where you hear the truth. I know it's mad, but actually what I hear is that where we are different is it's a very coherent platform. So the time to build new services, new products is really accelerated. That the security is extremely high. That some of our managed services really enable and accelerate the time to value. And so they're some of the major things. I think the final thing is really a level of innovation, that we are constantly iterating our platforms and delivering value. Now, we're not necessarily announcing lots of widgets. We'll try and embed those services and those extra features within our existing services, because we want to make it an easier service to use. So, for example, within our analytics service, BigQuery, you can pull in machine learning with 2 lines of code. And it's that type of development that's a little bit thoughtful, but actually adds a lot of value to clients using the platform.
Well, 2 lines of code sounds simple, but it's actually really hard to do. It was, I think, Steve Jobs, forgive me mentioning the big A, but who said that complex is easy, simple is hard, simplest is hardest. And actually getting to that point is really, really difficult, but really appreciated by engineers and anybody from a business context. I'm super interested as well how you see the evolution of the fintech conversation and the financial services industry into Sybos, for instance. So we saw a lot in retail, we've seen a lot in the SME space, a lot in the providers to banks and specialists. Do you think in the transaction banking and financial market space, A, cloud, and B, fintech is gaining more traction?
Well, I think it is, because I think what financial institutions are looking for are ways of accelerating. We know it's hard to transform within an organization, just because of the history, the legacy, the level of complexity. But actually bringing in fintechs who can solve for some of these problems are some of the great ways of accelerating how people are solving business problems.
And that network of partners can create a really interesting network effect. Well, listen, that's all we've got time for this week, unfortunately. We are pushed up against it. So if people want to find out more about you and more about what you do at Google Cloud, where do they go to find out more?
So my email is adyp@google.com.
Oh, you got a good one.
Yeah.
just a few letters. adyp@google.com. Listen, thank you so much for tuning in. If you want more insights like this, but you don't want to see my face, then why not listen to our FinTech Insider podcast, available on your favorite podcast client right now. And if you want a topic discussed here on air, FinTech Insider on air, well, hit us up on those emails. I'm Simon at 11fs.com, or tweet us at FinTech Insiders. Adrian, thank you very much for being with us this week.
Thank you, Simon.
Thank you, and bye for now.